Mark Carney keeps having his lies exposed daily. It seems new lies are exposed, or he lies again about things. Semiconductors was the lie yesterday as Trump is signing semiconductor deals. Last week, this is the last week of the Liberal leadership pageant. So we're going to have the show and then the crowning. And because this is not an election by any stretch of the imagination, they said 400,000 people signed up, but now only 100,000 have verified themselves. So a whole bunch of trolls were going to get in there and turn things. And how can they be assured that a whole bunch of trolls aren't in there and are going to turn things? Anyway, regardless of all of that, China, India, all of these other places have their fingers in the leadership pie. And us poor Canadian citizens, we get pushed out of that. We don't get any of that pie. No, sir. When we're in conflict with our biggest trading partner, the best place for the prime minister is to be out of the country. So Justin Trudeau is gallivanting around Europe right now. I think he's in Rome today. So that's interesting. Jagmeet Singh doesn't want Donald Trump allowed in Canada, and he wants him banned from the G7. Justin Trudeau says, no, we're not going to do that. So that's, I mean, at least some decorum coming from Canada's prime minister, who's only got, 5 days left? Something like that. On the 9th, he's supposed to be done, right? Elon Musk is a member of the Royal Society, and they want to strip him of that because he supports Trump. So there is a real cost if you say, hey, maybe this Trump guy it's got some ideas and everything's not all bad about him. They're like, get out, you're done. And Trump halted weapon sales in the Ukraine, and tariff day. It's tariff day, everybody. Are you ready? We are on this ride, and we've been on this ride for a little while, although it seems like we got to the top of the hill, went around a corner like we were going to go down a drop, and Trump said, you know what, we'll just kick it off for another month. So we started climbing again, and we were like, okay, I guess we're just going to go up higher. Sounds fun. And now it looks like we're really, honestly, falling down the drop. And we'll see. I think that, we could stop the tariffs at any time, by becoming the 51st state, as Trump has said. I don't know how that would happen, but because it doesn't seem like our leadership is really interested in all that. Every single one of them has said, no matter the pain, no matter the cost, we will bear any burden to stay Canadian and sovereign. And it's interesting because it seems like we've taken the Americans' money up to this point, and now we're saying it's a threat to our country for you to take away this money, but also we'll bear any burden. And those two things aren't the same. Like, those two things are conflicting. Those two things are opposite, right? We'll bear any burden, but also don't you dare take away that money that you give us that we really like. So it's weird. We'll bear any burden, but we'll complain about it every single day. Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. Tariffs and the rest, but we're starting with tariffs. Actually, tonight, so I can't report on it yet, is the State of the Union address. And so Trump has been kind of signaling that this is a big deal. He's talked about how this is a big deal. And he says, tomorrow night will be big. That's tonight. I will tell it like it is. And Eva Chipik says, what do you think this is about? State of the Union. It's the State of the Union. That's what it is. That's exactly what's happening. And so Trump's not going to back off on tariffs on the day he's going to be addressing everybody for the State of the Union, right? And it's not just Canada that's getting tariffs, it's Mexico and China and a bunch of other things as well. Here's Trump talking about this yesterday. Here we go.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take effect tomorrow?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Mr. President, just to follow up on my colleague's question.
And just so you understand, vast amounts of fentanyl have poured into our country from Mexico. And as you know, also from China, where it goes to Mexico and goes to Canada. And China also had an additional 10, so it's 10 plus 10. And it comes in from Canada and it comes in from Mexico. And that's a very important thing to say.
On the tariffs, is there...
So there you go. He's still blaming fentanyl. And BUAC says, notice the fentanyl czar hasn't done anything yet. No headlines or statements of the czar doing anything to stop fentanyl from crossing the border. Pure ceremonial position, just like the Prime Minister of Canada. Brian Lilly says, Donald Trump has amended a previous executive order. He's set to remove the duty-free de minimis treatment of Canadian goods under $800 shipped to the United States. This is not a tariff, but will have a big impact on businesses. White House says it's about drugs. So interesting. And Tracy is responding to the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail is reporting that the RCMP commissioner says there's no data that fentanyl is moving south in mass quantities. And Tracy highlights that's the point. It's the fentanyl that you didn't catch that's the issue. You don't have data on drugs that didn't get caught. And so it seems like Well, it seems like they know there's an issue, and they're claiming that Donald Trump is lying, but I think that there's a lot of evidence to say that he's not lying. Now, there are people out there who say that the fentanyl being trafficked over the border is minimal, but Canada imports the precursors and has massive fentanyl labs, and we've had a bunch of busts over February to kind of show, I guess, that we're taking this seriously. But it seems like they're not arresting anybody. If they get arrested, they get let out on bail. If they're on bail, who knows where they go? And so it's interesting because it seems like a carefully orchestrated show to seem like we're doing something against or doing something to address the concerns brought up by our neighbor. But like a lot of the agencies that Trump is dealing with internally, they're not actually doing what he said, and we're not actually doing what was asked of us. We're just putting on a show to make it look like we're doing something. They're leaving the labs there. Another person comes in and runs the lab. They have the trucking companies all set up and just put another driver in. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the infrastructure is left alone. People can't even see it, right? They're like Bart in the burlesque house. It's happening. And yet we're pretending like, oh my gosh, we've done everything we could. No, not even a little tiny bit. Naya says, I'm sick and I can't sleep. Who wants the tariff, the scoop on the tariffs? Here we go. If you think the USA complaints about drugs and border and China is BS, then you're part of the problem. Sam Cooper, at great personal risk, has detailed exactly how China is using organized crime and corrupt Canadian politicians to infiltrate Canada and the USA. Have you heard of the Vancouver method? It is a way to launder precursor chemicals, create drugs, sell the drugs, launder the money through real estate and casinos. And it is named after Vancouver because that's where they pioneered the practice, right? Isn't that crazy? We have a drug laundering, money laundering operation style position, like framework named after Vancouver. That's not good, everybody. Like, that's bad, okay? TD Bank got a huge fine for being the bank of money launderers and human traffickers and drug dealers. And I mean, that's bad too. And it doesn't seem to be a big deal. Nobody seems to care about that, but it's a big deal. It's a big deal because now it's leading to 25% tariffs, and everybody's going to say that mean Trump, but it's not. It's not Trump. It's our elected officials turning a blind eye to the things that matter and trying to put on a show for things that don't. Well, we'll use taxpayer dollars and rent some Black Hawk helicopters and do a whole press event. Give me a break, right? Like, we'll do photos and stuff. Give me a break. It doesn't help at all, right? And especially if you arrest anybody. Have they arrested anybody? I don't think so. Maybe one or two, right? Naya continues, the tariff started at 12:01 March 4th. There are 25% on all Canadian and Mexico products and an additional 10% to become 20% on China, except it's only 10% on Canadian energy resources. That's obviously oil and gas, but corn or electricity is also an energy resource, so the devil's in the details. In 2018, Trump put a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminium. How'd that work out after 11 months? Canada's exports of steel fell 38%, but purchases of U.S. steel also reduced 30%. It was estimated the U.S. lost 75,000 jobs related to the steel tariff, though U.S. steel companies did well. Ford and General Motors say they lost $1.75 billion during the 11-month steel tariff in 2018. A group called Center for Automotive Research said all imports 25% tariff on steel and aluminum will cause USA car dealers to lose $66 billion and 117,000 jobs, but it's 25% Canadian, Mexico, and 20% China, so not total. CAR study says in the auto and related businesses alone, the USA faces 714,000 layoffs due to a 25% tariff on all imports, but it's 25% Canadian, Mexican, and 20% China, so not total. And the research study says the USA also auto sales could fall as much as 2 million cars due to higher prices of steel and aluminum from across the board 25%. So, but the thing that it's not taking into account here that I'm kind of thinking about is Trump's deal with Russia. Can Russia step in and fill in those gaps? And will it be at a cheaper rate, right? Like, he's trying to stop a war and trying to even out trade from people who have taken advantage of the United States trade situation for a long time, and they're getting itchy about it. But Russia wouldn't be itchy about a trade deal with the United States and allowing, American companies to come in. And Glenn Beck does a breakdown on how that would actually add to Ukraine's defense and so on and so forth. But it's interesting because I think Trump's trying to fix this issue before it becomes an issue. I think he's going to offer the auto companies access to different steel from a different market. But we'll see. Who knows? I don't know. Naya continues. She says the president of Ford threw some cold water on the Canada-Mexico tariffs. Up to 2 million cars from non-tariff zones could come in and be significantly cheaper than North American cars. My guess is Trump wants to get more control over Canadian immigration, border, and policing to help root out China, organized crime, and Canadian political infestation. USA sees Canada as a staging ground for China and agents to keep the USA focused at home while China attacks Taiwan. Finn. And so, yeah, I think that there's something to that. I think Canada has some real issues with infestation of Chinese and other foreign agents. And I think Trump recognizes that. Indeed, I think Trump looks at the evidence and has more evidence because he's the president of the United States, Five Eyes. And there's a reason that Canada wasn't invited to buying subs recently. There's a reason that we're being cut out of certain things. And so I think Trump knows even more. And so with that knowledge, us being cut out, it seems makes sense isn't right. But if our government is corrupted by at least 11 up to 40, I think, Chinese agents, and we are incapable of doing anything about it, and yet we've known since 2023, then how do you deal with that as a foreign leader who's got this communist kind of vassal state on the northern border? How do you deal with that in a practical way? And so we're watching one way, and us as the citizens are caught in the middle. We're gonna feel pain from this, and that's not great. That's not ideal, right? But as I was saying yesterday, sometimes you have to go through some pain to get on the other side of that issue and then become freed from it, and then you can run and fly and stuff like that. Or another way to put it is sometimes you have to make a mess to clean things up. Sometimes you have to take everything out and absolutely make a mess, right? And then after you get rid of all the dirt and get rid of all the garbage and blah, 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 and then put everything back, you're like, wow, this place is way cleaner than it was before, because all that other stuff that we couldn't see but we knew was there is gone too, right? And so I think that's possibly where we're going, and possibly it'll be worthwhile. But again, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. There was a monkey with a machine gun, and I thought, oh my gosh, like that's kind of crazy. Anyway, the reason that I had this tab was Canada Record says, happy tariff day. As a reminder, Trump's 25% tariffs are paid by U.S. consumers for products imported from Canada. Trudeau's regulatory 25% tariffs are paid by Canadian consumers. Here's a list. Enjoy your glass of OJ plus thousands of other products. So there's a list of Canadian tariffs against U.S. products. So those U.S. products will cost more because Canada is imposing these tariffs on those products to hurt the USA, because they think that we won't buy those products because they'll be more expensive because they're U.S. products, right? And this is all catching us in the middle and harming us more. So boo Canadian government, and boo to all the years of bad mismanagement that has led to this situation. And I mean, it's been purposeful bad mismanagement. Don't misunderstand. Like, these people did this on purpose. They were creating a situation. They offshored jobs and told us it was going to be better. They offshored all sorts of things and said, no, this is the way to make things cheaper. And then they switched things on their head and said, oh my gosh, these long supply lines with all their CO2, that's intolerable. We can't possibly do that. Why don't you just have a 15-minute city where you can't leave your neighborhood? Whereas before, people used to live and work at a plant in their local area. You know what I mean? You'd go to the shoe plant, right? But now the shoe plant is in Bangladesh. So it's like the whole thing, we were bamboozled in the 90s for this whole free trade thing. And now they're saying, oh yeah, that was a bad idea. That's terrible. So now we're being crushed to fix it, which not great, right? And all of these people, they're not going to be held accountable. They got kickbacks, and they got all sorts of, they made all sorts of money doing these things, and their companies went global, and they've all made all sorts of money. But now we're in a situation where this is causing it's a Ponzi scheme, and it's collapsing. And so in order to fix the Ponzi scheme, we have to go back to a situation where we're not allowing the Ponzi schemers to run things. essentially, right? Mark Carney says these tariffs are unjustified, direct attack on Canadian workers, families, and businesses. Canada should retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs that will have maximum impact on the United States and minimum impact on Canada. So he's saying Canada should put tariffs on goods coming into Canada from the United States to make Canadians choose something else, so American goods aren't purchased in Canada, and that'll teach those American companies. And I think that's bullshit, and it hurts Canadians. The American companies aren't going to notice 40 million people not buying their stuff, probably, because we're a small state, right? Or a medium-sized, a big state, I guess, medium-sized state. They're bigger. And it hurts us because that costs us more money, and we're carbon taxed to heck anyway, right? Like, so Mark Carney is going for exactly the same plan as all of the other leaders in Canada. Nobody's saying, hey, we're going to fix that border for real, sir, this time. We really, really mean it this time. They're saying we're going to counter tariff. That's going to work, because it's not going to work. We're not going to win this war. The proceeds from our tariffs, continued Carney, should be used to protect our own workers. The unpredictability of the U.S. trade policy underscores the imperative of Canada using every tool at our disposal to build the strongest economy in the G7. We are taxing the inputs to our economy, leading to a collapse of business investment here, leading to an inability for people to make ends meet, pay their bills, and things like that. If you tax the inputs and then say, we're going to build the strongest economy in the G7, you are completely out of touch with reality, like completely and utterly out of touch with reality. If you're taxing your own inputs, you are hamstringing your ability to be productive. Our productivity is tanking, and that is a known, expected, wanted side effect of the carbon tax, period. And so if we continue with all of this stuff, and if Carney gets in, we will, it's not going to get fixed. It's going to get worse. That's it. Worse and worse and worse. We didn't ask for this fight. Yes, we did. But Canadians are united and determined in trade, as in hockey, we will win. What? What? Good job referencing that super Canadian thing, fellow Canadian. When did you just move here, fellow Canadian? Mark Carney, moron. Yellow-toothed moron. We'll get there. We'll get there soon. Don't worry. Actually, it's much later in the show than I thought. I thought Mark Carney would be closer, but we've got a lot of tariff stuff to cover. Here's 10 seconds of Pierre Poilievre saying, Mark Carney's plan. I like it. And it's super good. And we're going to do exactly Mark Carney's plan.
Meanwhile, the opposition is calling for more focus on interprovincial trade.
Regardless of what the president does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore.
Meanwhile, the opposition is...
Oh, there was another video I had where he said we should do counter tariffs. But that's what he's proposing. He's basically saying we're going to do exactly the same thing as Mark Carney. Apologies that he didn't say that verbatim in this video, but when I find a video of him saying that, I'll put it up. I'm sure I had one before. He said it in not as many words in other statements. Tanya says, here Poilievre trash Americans as our closest allies instead of acknowledging Trump's tariffs are fair and are helping us clean up dangerous cartels and extremism. Who is lining his pockets? How can anyone vote for him? I agree entirely. Rupa says, why isn't Pierre Poilievre making the case for not retaliating against the United States when the economics is very clear that retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. will have minimal effect on them, so the companies won't feel it, but will be doubly devastating for Canada? Why is he in lockstep with Trudeau? That's my question too. How does this make any kind of sense? It doesn't make any kind of sense. It would be better to not retaliate and say, we are definitely going to try and fix this until you take those tariffs off. We don't want the tariffs. We don't want a tariff war with you. We don't want a trade war with you. We're going to do everything we can to fix these problems that are legitimate problems, and we're trying to fix them. That would be... What? Why can't we say that? Where's our leaders saying that? Oh, you're a Putin apologist. Oh, you like Trump. Like, okay, I like chocolate cereal. That's what I like. Okay. And I think they make chocolate cereal in Canada. So dodge that bullet until the chocolate gets cut off. Brian Passafume says, Premier Ford to cut off electricity exports to border states if Trump's tariffs go through tomorrow. I have not heard this morning. I was scrolling. I was looking for, these places are in brownout right now because of Doug Ford flicking off the lights. I don't think it's that easy, Doug. So I don't think this has happened, but this was threatened yesterday, and so I want to tell you. And if it did happen, I'll tell you tomorrow, I guess. Quote, if they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy with a smile on my face, he said. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Here's Doug Ford talking about this. Bruce says, Doug Ford says tomorrow, New York, Michigan, and Minnesota will go dark. I don't think so, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm not aware of this happening yet, but I could be wrong.
Of dollars of contracts that we have with the U.S. We are the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world. We buy over 3,600 products from 35 states. I talked to the governor of Kentucky and Mitch McConnell. Don't touch our bourbon. I'm going after absolutely everything. And I don't want to. We keep the lights on to 1.5 million homes in manufacturing in New York, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. If he wants to destroy our economy and our families, I will shut down the electricity going down to the U.S. And I'm telling you, we will do it. It's unfortunate. I would rather ship you more electricity, ship you more critical minerals. I want to ship you more energy, more potash to keep your farmers going, and uranium that you use for your nuclear power. It comes through from Saskatchewan over to Ontario. And it's going to be a massive, massive problem. I'm telling you, we love the Canadians love Americans. I love the U.S. Everyone does. And not one American friend. When I lived there for 20 years, I've talked to all of them. Hardcore Republicans are saying this is the biggest mistake President Trump has done, and we're dead against it.
They're not the president. So you lived in the States for 20 years? Huh. Weird. Can we have a premier who's like Canada first and who lives here? Where in the States did you live? Here's Made in Canada. Bloomberg is reporting that Canada will impose significant energy tariffs on the United States if Washington imposes tariffs on Canada. So that's different than turning off the lights, eh, Doug? Canada exports enough electricity to power more than 5.6 million homes in the United States. How many people lost power and for how long in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene or Helen? Which one, however you call it, I don't know. That's like Erin or Aaron in Ontario. Anyway, regardless of that, the interesting thing about that is it's not many homes. 5.6 million? Hold on a second. We'll have you power by this afternoon. We're just rerouting things. I have a feeling that this could be a fix with a very, very short time horizon, right? Like this is not going to take long to fix this problem. And so it's weird that this is like Ford's big thing. I think he's just going to realize that, they don't need our power, just like they don't need our cars. What now? Who's going to buy our cars? Here's the other part. If you turn off the power and Trump gets itchy about it, then he could turn off Enbridge Line 5 because Michigan was trying to shut it down. And I think Biden intervened. I think Biden said, no, you can't do that. But maybe I'm misremembering. I'm not 100% sure on that. And I can't remember the details, but I remember thinking to myself, that's interesting. Like that's an interesting turn of events. I didn't expect Biden to uphold this whole agreement, right? But Enbridge Line 5 passes under the Straits of Mackinac, which connects Lake Michigan to Lake Huron, and they could turn it off because it traverses their territory, as far as I understand it. And if Trump was feeling particularly vengeful, which people attribute to him, but I don't think I've seen that. Regardless, he could turn that off, possibly. Right? That would be a card that he could play, as unlikely as Doug Ford actually just flicking off the lights for multiple states for innocent people in a relatively cold March. I don't see him doing that because that's that's all the worst things that they accuse Trump of, right? To do that to innocent people. And so I don't see it. And I don't see Trump doing that. But these are cards you could play, right? And if Doug Ford wants to be a prime D-bag, then I mean, this is a trade war after all, right? So Unusual Whales says Ontario, Canada to stop nickel shipments to the U.S. per Premier Ford. This is like Sudbury, Ontario putting a gun in their mouth and saying, I will do it. I will do it. And then pulling the trigger and saying, see, are you happy now? Are you happy now? And it's like, okay, you've just killed your nickel mine, but all right, I guess so. Sounds good. So maybe the nickel mine will start up again, but maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Food Professor says Tariff Tuesday. What it means for your grocery bill in Canada? The U.S. is imposing 25% tariffs on all Canadian and Mexican imports, an extra 20% on China. And all three are hitting back with tariffs on food and AG commodities. What to expect? Higher prices for groceries, especially fresh produce, many non-perishable foods, frozen foods, and meat. Canadian food exports will take a hit. Supply chain disruptions, delays, and layoffs. So beef, wheat, and pork will take a hit. But here's the thing. Grocers and other food companies have been preparing for this for months. Expect price adjustments, sourcing shifts, and new trade routes. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this all plays out. Food professor again says minutes after new U.S. tariffs came into force against a slate of Chinese goods on Tuesday, Beijing responded by imposing 10 to 15% tariff percent levies against the United States, agricultural goods and foodstuffs. China needs food. Their population is starving, from what I understand. Maybe not starving, but there's concern that they may not have enough for the whole population. And so they import a lot of food on purpose. They export food too. You can get mushrooms and mandarin oranges and all sorts of things. But people are concerned about the growing quality as well. Like they're concerned it's grown in poison or something to that effect. But it's interesting that they're putting on these tariffs, again, on their own people for U.S. goods to impact the United States. I think this is not the right way to fight a trade war. But again, I've never fought a trade war, so I don't know. But if it's me, I'm looking at this, and especially from Canada. From China, I mean, I don't know. China has its own issues that I'm not as well versed on, I don't think. So I don't think I could give advice to China. But for me, I think that what we're doing in Canada is the absolute worst way to go about this. Jack says, let's see where we're at the stage of. Jagmeet Singh is calling for Trump to be basically blacklisted from the G7. We'll talk about that in a minute. Christia Freeland is calling on nuclear allies around the world to challenge Trump. Doug Ford is threatening not only a tariff war, but also to cut off power to quote unquote to the US, or quote unquote to the USA. Mark Carney is basically the Canadian version of Joe Biden, so no explanation necessary. And of course, Justin Trudeau thinks he's Cher and is doing his farewell tour while simultaneously sinking Canada even further. All of these people are steering us dangerously closer to an all-out war. Feel free to add anything I missed. Yeah, it seems about right. Things are looking weird and kind of dire. Here's Mel Jolie to make you feel worse. Mr. Surveillance says the United States has dealt with banana republics before. These lying Liberal Party ministers neither had the skill nor the will to fix the border in an entire decade, so the Americans aren't about to believe they did it in months. Only Canadian voters can be that gullible and stupid. Mel Jolie, says CBC Watcher, instills a whole lot of non-confidence regarding Canada's tariff response. And of course, I'll have the conversation with the Prime Minister when he lands because he's coming from London, and I'm going to a cabinet room right now to talk with my colleagues about what? About the Canada-US relations. The scorched earth Canada-US relations that you're ignoring of the issues that Trump has been highlighting for 6 months has led to? Cool. Super good. Here's Mel Jolie. We'll listen to as much as makes sense.
The Ministers of Public Safety and Immigration met with Tom Homan, the border czar of Trump, on Friday. It was a positive meeting, and we have a very strong border plan. We've invested in it. It is working. We're doing it for ourselves. And of course, it is part of the ongoing conversations we're having with the Trump administration. Should we have any more information, of course, we will provide you that information. But meanwhile, let's be clear. If Trump is imposing tariffs, we're ready. We are ready with $155 billion worth of tariffs, and we're ready with the first tranche of tariffs, which is $30 billion, which is already known.
She sounds like she's about to cry. She's like kind of breathless, and she's like, ooh, ooh. It sounds very brink of tears. Here is Mr. Miller, Mark Miller, and he's talking about how we're ready for pain. Canadians are not ready for. We're screaming now, like we haven't experienced pain yet, and we're worried about the potential for pain, and we're upset about it. So, and also, Mark Miller. This whole idea of like, yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's going to also hurt Americans, so it's going to be fine. This is the stupidest. I don't know how anybody can follow these people. They're idiots, and they prove over and over again their idiocy every time they open their mouth.
And will continue to be important to diversify our economies, but we can't replace an economy that is responsible for 80% of our trade overnight, and it's going to hurt. My message to Canadians is that we have a higher pain threshold than our partners to the south of us. We can continue to fight. We will have to bring the fight, and it will hurt Americans as well. Not to mention, and it's important to reiterate, that 35 of those states their primary trading partner is Canada. So it will hurt them. And we hope that logic will prevail.
Logic? You're not approaching it from the same position as Trump. So your logical conclusion is going to be different than his logical conclusion. The whole thing reeks of ideological allegiance that Trump is on a different side than everybody else. And it looks like he is going to push to get what he wants. Clinton says, according to reports from the Boston Globe, while visiting a Vermont-Quebec border community, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem stood on the American side and declared USA's number one. And then she crossed into the Canadian territory, repeatedly asserting the 51st state. Witnesses report that she made this statement multiple times, emphasizing USA number one without any acknowledgement of Canada. This incident starkly underscores the implicit challenge to Canadian sovereignty and the growing adversarial approach of Americans. I think it's interesting, and I would love to see video of this. If anybody's got video of this, send it to me. I want to see her doing this because that would be hilarious for me. I think it'd be funny. And the whole thing is meant to show how powerful the United States is. It's that simple, I think. Here's Doug Ford again. He says, if we want to survive these tariffs, we need to make sure that we get the federal government out of the way. Ford speaks on the importance of urgently removing regulatory hurdles for permits if Canada wants to compete with the Trump administration. He talks about how he's already got road being built and he's made agreements with First Nations, but the federal government is in the way and stopping the ability for development of natural resources, and he wants them to get out of the way. So that's interesting. And here is the food professor, and he's highlighting, or Brian Lilly's highlighting, U.S. Secretary Scott Bessent said, it'd be really nice if Canada had tariffs on China. That'd be really great. But if you had tariffs on China and Canada, almost all of our products come from China. Like a lot of our products come from China. There would be a situation where dollar stores would close because they wouldn't be able to source products because they wouldn't be able to get them cheap enough. Because we've been in a situation where we've offshored a lot of the jobs and we've devalued our currency. And so a dollar store has become a $5 store now too. Anyway, here's this guy saying, you guys would be it'd be really nice. It'd be a nice gesture if you guys put tariffs on China. I don't know.
And commerce. So I'm going to leave.
We have screwed ourselves to the point where if Canada puts economic sanctions on China, we can't because we're owned by China. But also, it would tank our economy. We would have to have a plan to do that, and the plan would have to be phased in over months, and we'd have to have some kind of supports to support Canadian production of the objects and things we import from China at cheap rates, right? Like at about the same price as we can get it from China. So it would need a plan. And I'm not saying, we should not do this because, I like China or anything like that. I think China is looking out for their interests, and they understand their position in the world way better than Canada does. Canada, we're in a situation where we think we don't have to worry about China or India or anybody. And the United States is going to just keep giving us billions of dollars a year, and they're not going to question anything that we're doing. They're not going to question tariffs that we're putting on them and their dairy and anything like that. They're going to let us continue just surfing on this couch forever. That's how we behaved. So we did not take seriously our position in the world, and we're hurting for it. And China understood their position in the world and are taking steps to shore up what they want. And so I'm not trying to cast shade toward China. I don't want to be China. I don't want them to run Canada. Currently, they seem to be running Canada. But I don't like that situation. I think we should fix it. But there's going to be inherent pain in that. And so, or you have a government that's going to say, listen, we're going to phase this in. But if you have a government that says that, then presumably it's not run by China. So our government's not going to say that because they're run by China. So anyway, this is the secretary saying it'd be super good if Canada did this too, and we're not going to do it. Okay, for multiple reasons, because we're run by China.
Leave that question to them. I do think one very interesting proposal that the Mexican government has made is perhaps matching the U.S. On our China tariffs. I think it would be a nice gesture if the Canadians did it also. So in a way, we could have Fortress North America from the flood of Chinese imports that's coming out of the most unbalanced economy in the history of modern times.
So there you go. So I don't think we're going to do that because we're not playing the same game that the Americans are playing right now. We're playing China's good. Close our eyes to everything else that's going on in the world and hope bad man Trump goes away, right? Like, it's terrible. Here's Jagmeet Semiconductor's contribution, okay? Somebody else noticed Mark Carney's teeth. Somebody else. Not just, this is not me, okay? This came up organically, I promise. Sadie, Ron says, does Mark Carney own a toothbrush? Sadie says, it's not, if it's not Missy, I don't own shampoo or a hairbrush. It's, I don't own a toothbrush, creeps. And so this is the Toronto Sun, and Ledrew says Liberal Party members would be smart to reject Mark Carney. And they use this picture, right? And so like the picture is fine, except until you get to the bottom half, right? I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't. I'm not even joking. Oh, I wish I was joking. But other people noticed. It's not just me. It's not just me. Okay. It came up organically. I promise. Leah says only 80,000. What happened to 400,000 who registered? Sashit Mera. It's the Liberal Party, right? I guess it's become a whole other demographic there. Over 80,000 Liberals have already voted, and there's still time to confirm your eligibility, verify your identity, and vote for the next Liberal leader. Join the 100,000 Liberals who have already been verified by visiting secureliberal.ca. Verified today. No thanks. No thanks. Where do they send that data? I'd be very interested to find out where they send that data to get verified. I bet you the company's in Israel. I'm just total shot in the dark. I haven't even looked. The one that Musk uses on X, it's one of the reasons I'm not monetized, actually, is because they verify your identity through an Israeli company. No thanks. Thank you very much. No, thank you. Anne says, this needs more attention. I'm not alone in this complaint. Anne says, the Liberal leadership race is crooked as F. The voting list is pre-vetted. The unelected candidate is being installed. As a Canadian, I have every right to cast a ballot for the next prime minister. I followed every rule. And so they're gonna go after these people. They're going to go after anybody who is not drinking the Liberal Kool-Aid. If you vote for, Ruby Dalla, if you vote for Arya Chandra, then people are going to be coming to your door like, I don't know, there's a $10,000 fine because you didn't vote for the right person. Far away, you think? I don't know. Blacklock's reporter says political aides shield Mark Carney from media scrutiny following criticism he lied about his record, won't publicly disclose events he attends, including fundraisers on Saturday. Where is he hiding? Yes, so he is certainly hiding. Jamil Giovanni says, Stephen Harper writes, I have listened with increasing disbelief to Mark Carney's attempt to take credit for things he had little or nothing to do with back then. He has been doing this at the expense of the late Jim Flaherty, among the greatest finance ministers in Canadian history, who sadly is not here to defend his record. But let me be very clear. The hard calls during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis were made by Jim, not lying Mark Carney, right? So Harper slams Carney for taking credit for Flaherty's work. And isn't that interesting, right? You go and it's like the Liberals. Harjit Sajjan had the stolen valor. Mark Carney's got stolen financial valor. That crash was real bad. Good thing I was around to tell Jim Flaherty what to do. Bullshit, Mark Carney, right? Moon landing, stolen valor, right? Like all the other Terry Fox, stolen valor, all the other memes that I saw, right? So Mark Carney is a liar up and down, and people have noticed to the point where they're memeing about it. Sue says, outsider my butt. All lies lead back to Mark Carney and the Liberal Party. They can't be trusted. They must be investigated. Nice work, Naya. Anyone want to explain why Canada's government was arranging meetings for Mark Carney, Gerald Butts, and Catherine McKenna with the U.S. ambassador in 2022? Carney was chair at Brookfield. Butts was at Eurasia Company with Carney's wife, and McKenna worked for the United Nations. Can you say corrupt? Yes, it's all corrupt. And all of the EU works with the people they're installing here. Like all of the leadership of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, the bank, the European bank leader who looks just like Ursula von der Leyen, I'm sure they're all in on it together. They all act like they're all on the same team. They're all sitting there eating the popcorn when one of them's saying something. They're hanging on every breath and nodding away like they're Chrystia Freeland tweaking in the side there. It's weird. It's weird and obvious too, right? It's like these people, it's kind of like when you're watching Survivor and you can see the two tribes are you can see who the people are pulling for and so on and so forth. It seems like that. It seems as obvious to me as that. And it seems obvious to me that the people who represent the European Union and Canada are on a different tribe than the people who represent the United States at this point in time. And they want absolutely different things. And if the European tribe wins, we're all going to be in a lot of trouble because they represent technocratic, communist, digital ID, central bank digital currency, the whole shebang. And I don't know that Trump doesn't represent that. I don't. Catherine Fitz thinks he does, thinks that he's quarterbacking the AI kind of control grid, and it's way worse than what the European people are planning. But I can see what the European people are planning, and it seems like a control grid just like China, because China's fundamentally in control of all of those people, I think. But what Trump's doing, it seems like he's disrupting that. I hope that he's disrupting that. That's the conclusion that I come to. But there are people out there who are worried that Trump is representing, and Fitz is the biggest voice that I know that is, and probably the most reliable, because I think that she's wicked smart. So not like that James Lindsay. Ridiculous. What a ridiculous downfall. Anyway, she's one who's concerned, but I still don't think she's correct in this. Regardless, take it all with a grain of salt, because I don't think there's anybody who's going to be perfect. Anybody, ever. Here's a whole list of Mark Carney lying. Mark Carney at the Flying Monkeys brewery yesterday in Barrie steals chunks of Poilievre's platform. What did we learn? He says, we're going to build, baby, build. Isn't that a Poilievre slogan? Aren't slogans bad? We better start putting proceeds to charity. Realizes only that he's talking that despite being rich, he's not giving any proceeds of his book to charity. Great look. So Mark Carney is just a disaster, and he's not smooth. His speaking is kind of messy, and he doesn't connect with people at all. White North is responding to Mark Carney. Carney says, small businesses like the Portugalia Bakery are the heartbeat of our communities. It's time to get our economy back on track so that more people want to open places like this. It's time to build an economy that Canadians have confidence in. And White North says, Carney says the Liberal Party with the same politicians and him as a former advisor will be different. Carney and his plans have led to the situation we're currently in. That's just the cold, hard facts of it. And him being the leader said the budgets balance themselves. The leader now, Justin Trudeau, didn't think about the budget. Just because Carney will think about the budget doesn't mean that it will be fixed. Carney was basically doing Chrystia Freeland's job while she was the finance minister, and look at where that got us. So I don't think that Carney's going to fix anything. He represents a continuation of more of the same, and it's incredible that he's running on a change ticket, and they are really trying to burn us out with wanting an election. Like now that the Ontario election's over, they've jazzed up the leadership election, and so they're gonna try and say, oh, nobody wants an election now. I don't think so. Andrew Scheer is responding. He says a small group of Liberals are going to install Mark Carney as Prime Minister. The rest of the Canadian voters have no say. Carney will have all the power that comes with being Prime Minister, but refuses to disclose his conflicts or clarify his position on issues, and he keeps lying. What's he hiding? He's a globalist. That's what he's hiding. Here's Chrystia Freeland, and she says, Canada first. And so she goes on Inside with Jen Psaki, because she knows that nobody watches CBC. Absolutely nobody watches CBC. Is that how you say your name? I think that's how you say your name. So Inside with Jen Psaki. Sure. Have fun with that. I don't watch MSNBC because it does nothing but lie. And that woman who Freeland's interviewing with was Joe Biden's press secretary. And she was terrible. Like, she was awful. The whole time she was awful. Holly. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful